public radio station to running this group of entrepreneurs? And I think the answer is adult supervision. You need some. Because if you had a bunch of entrepreneurs running an entrepreneurial support organization, what would happen? 50 million great ideas. Nobody writing them down. So that's why you need people like us who can help take minutes and send out invoices and stuff like that. So the Council for Entrepreneurial Development was started a while ago, and the idea in part was always to change the culture of the organization. So I will start by showing you the picture of a casserole. And this is a casserole that I myself made just a few days ago. It was a very delicious tuna noodle casserole, I might add. And the reason I'm showing this to you is because it has something to do with the start of CED, all this many years ago in 1984. What happened back then was, back in 1984, if you were, say, working in the Research Triangle Park area and you were a smart person, here's what happened. You'd graduate from college, you'd end up working at IBM, you'd stay there for 30 years, you'd retire, you'd get your gold watch, you'd play a lot of golf, you'd go to the mountains, you'd go to the beach. If you were, say, a brilliant chemist, you would get a job in one of the area research universities. You would stay there for 30 years, you would write grants, you would get graduate students, you hope to get tenure, and then if you were lucky, you would get your gold watch, you'd retire, you'd play golf, you'd go to the beach. Well, there were a group of business people around here who said, you know, that's an awful lot of brain power, and we could be doing something different with that. So the idea was, well, why don't we come up with some kind of a plan to create an organization that would encourage risk-taking? Because if there is one thing that is at the center of entrepreneurial insanity, it's risk-taking. You know, who in the world would go out there and risk everything they got to start a company, to leave that secure job, to try something different? And so I put up the casserole because the thought was, at least their observation was, back in 1984, if you were in Research Triangle Park and you lost your job at IBM, or you didn't get tenure at one of the universities, the neighbors would come over to console you with a casserole and say, what a terrible thing. This is awful. It's the end of the world. Well, they noted if you were in Silicon Valley in 1984 and you lost your job at IBM, or you didn't get tenure at Stanford, then neighbors would come over with their best bottle of wine and say, terrific, now it's time to start your company. So the idea always was that we needed to change the culture around here, and that CED, the Council for Entrepreneurial Development, would provide education and classes, but it would also be about culture change, to take more risks. Now, how can I underscore this point a little bit better than what I've told you already? What else do you think about in North Carolina when you think about what describes the culture of our region? How about the Andy Griffith Show? So does this scream entrepreneurial to you? No, I don't think so. You have, here we go, Andy and Barney Fife, and it's great. And you know, there's nothing wrong with the show. In fact, a lot of people love this show, and I'm one of them. But it speaks of small town values, and it speaks of, you know, tight-knit community. There are a few eccentrics in the crowd for sure, but you know, the whole town takes care of them, and nothing too crazy ever happens. And if you think of something entrepreneurial, you might have Opie, maybe, you know, washing your car to break, you know, pay for the window that he broke playing baseball or something like that. And when you look at, you know, Gomer Pyle, again, it's not exactly telling you a lot of entrepreneurial activities here. And I have to say that I think that the Andy Griffith effect, which is my own original thesis on the idea about entrepreneurship in North Carolina, extends beyond our reaches as well. Because a friend of mine was telling me about a trip he made up to Connecticut not so long ago. He had attended a very prestigious prep school up there, and he was part of a fundraising committee. And so he was talking to some of the folks there and said, okay, I'll volunteer to take the phone-a-thon in North Carolina for this prep school. And he said one of the blue bloods up there looked down his nose at him and asked him very seriously, do they have telephones in North Carolina? So the answer, of course, is yes. But the good news is that things have changed a bit over the years, and I think that there's some excitement that's going on about entrepreneurship. And I'm also here today to tell you about the 6 symptoms of entrepreneurial insanity, because I said you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur. Now, one thing I think that's a question that comes up often in the time that I've been here at CED in the last couple of years is, can you teach someone to be an entrepreneur? And I say the answer to that, again, is no. You can teach someone some business practices, and you can teach somebody how to do a market analysis, but to really have that desire to get up every morning and do something that is so risky and that has a great potential for reward, but also has that great potential to crash and burn, I don't think that is something you can teach. It's something you can encourage and nurture and point in the right direction and help from making a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think it's really one of those things that you either have or you don't. So so one of the symptoms of entrepreneurial excellence or entrepreneurial insanity is passion. And I have to say we've got a couple of examples going on about this right now. Now, CED just recently moved its offices. We moved from the edge of Research Triangle Park down to downtown Durham to be part of the American Underground, which is an exciting new community in American Tobacco campus that includes a bunch of entrepreneurial startup companies and also a couple of business accelerators. And the business accelerators are right down the hall from us. They're Launchbox, which works with a bunch of digital startup companies. And then we also work with Joystick Labs, which is the next generation of game developers. And so what these folks have done is they're in there 24/7 working on their games and working on their new companies. And they've got 12 weeks to create everything that they need to create.
Thank you, Matt. They've got 12 weeks to create their programs. And when they're done, they're either going to be ready to go on to the next stage or they're going to be ready to fold up and go home. And again, this is something a little bit different from what we're used to seeing because the idea of being an entrepreneur, you got to succeed quickly, you also have to fail quickly and move on, which is something we're not particularly good at around here. But I think the other exciting thing we're seeing is these companies that are down in the incubators are doing things that I don't say that I necessarily understand very well. We've got a lot of social networking companies going on. There's some analytics companies. And on the gaming side, there's one company that professes to have as their business plan that they are going to create a wall of awesome. Now, just what the wall of awesome is going to look like, I really don't know, but I think that's a passionate statement that you're going to create a wall of awesome. The second symptom is caffeine for entrepreneurial insanity. Now, it is no surprise at all that many entrepreneurs have their very first office. It's at Panera Bread because you can have free internet access and you can drink coffee all day long and they're not going to bug you very much. But I have to say, when I got started in this job at CED, I was a 1 cup a day drinker for coffee. Now I don't feel like I'm awake until I've had at least 2. And it's a bad addiction after a while. I've had so many meetings in coffee shops, I can't even keep track anymore. There's a great story I love to tell. There's an incubator around here called the First Flight Venture Center, and that's located at the edge of the park. What it offers is fairly inexpensive space for you to go in and start your company. Nothing fancy. But I remember when I first took the tour over there, they said, "Want to see one of our companies?" I said, "Sure." So they said, "Okay, these guys aren't in right now, but they're a telecom startup." I said, "Okay, great." So they went to the office, they opened the door, it looked like linoleum floors, not much going on. There was a table full of wires and stuff dripping off everywhere. There were a couple of computers. Somebody had a sleeping bag rolled up in the corner. And then the other thing they had, a giant recyclable container of Red Bull. And so that was basically it. So you live on caffeine. I know it is a stereotype, but honestly, it's true. The third symptom of entrepreneurial insanity is a willful disregard of the law of probability. So if you're told that you've got a 2 in 10 chance of having a successful company, does that sound like a really good odds to you? I have yet to talk to any entrepreneur who thinks they're going to be one of the 8 in 10 who fails. They all are sure they're going to go out there and they're going to be the one that hits the home run, and I'm really glad they do. Because honestly, if we didn't have them out there taking all this risk, we'd just be sitting around waiting for somebody else to hand us a paycheck, and that wouldn't be very interesting. So I'm excited to see when I see the willful disregard of the law of probability. I mean, one of the companies you talked about as the sponsor today is Eye Contact, and that's a great example. Because the founder of that company, his name is Ryan Alice, when Ryan got started, he came up to look at UNC to go to school. And while he was there, he took a bus out to visit CED. And what was the reason for that? He was really sure when he was in college he was going to want to start his company. And he did. He didn't finish college, but he now has a great company. And there's also other things that happened. A company like Eye Contact, which does marketing by email, has done very well during this recession. In fact, there's quite a few companies in CED that have really had a pretty good time of it, even though the economy's been lousy the last few years, because they help other companies save money. And companies like that have done quite well. And they had a willful disregard for the law of probability. Symptom number 4 of entrepreneurial insanity is the inability to work for somebody else. How many does this apply to? Come on, I know you're out there. Oh, yeah, I see some hands go up, right? I see people holding their heads down, right? Why are you here today? Would you tell your boss? Can we be doing something different? But this is really true. And it's really, if you are a boss, it's not your fault. It's not your fault these folks can't work for you. They just can't stand the idea of it. They want to be out there starting their company. They're going to work for you for a while so they can get a little knowledge. They're going to work for you for a while to figure out how to put you out of business. They're going to work for you for a while to figure out how they can sell to you the thing that your company's not doing very well. And they're going to work for you so they can say, boy, that had a terrible boss. I had a terrible boss, that's why I had to go out and start my own company. But in a lot of ways, it's okay. You know, this is just that breed. And it's not the fact that the supervisor's not doing a good job. It's just they really can't do this. The other thing that I think is interesting, you also ask the other side, which is if you've worked for a big company, can you be an entrepreneur? And I think that's an interesting question because during this last recession, we had a bunch of people come to us who'd been involved with layoffs at some of the larger companies around here. And they said, I'd really like to go work for a startup. But you know, they weren't necessarily a very good fit, partly because it's that risk tolerance issue. Can you stand it? Can you stand not having a paycheck? Can you stand going in not necessarily knowing if this great gamble you're doing is going to pay off? For some people, the ones who can't work for anybody else, it's like, let me at it. But for a lot of people who've had that steady job, it's a hard transition to make. So even during the last round of downsizing, we didn't see that many people coming out of the larger companies land in the startups. And I will say, one of the things that I hear the most often from entrepreneurs in CED is that they have a hard time hiring people, even with all the opportunity out there right now, because a lot of people just can't stand this lifestyle. But for those who really want to live it, it's the only way to go. Symptom number 5 is a spouse with a job and benefits. This is not necessarily friends with benefits, but this is, I think, very true around here in particular. Perhaps because the entrepreneurs we see in Research Triangle Park are a little bit older. We see a number of people coming right out of college who are doing that thing in the garage and building the next big who's-he what's-it, and that's great. But we have a lot of entrepreneurs, especially those who are in the life science field, who are working on medical device companies or biotech companies, who are in their 30s and 40s, and they've been at it for a while. And that's a long time to develop something before that idea pays off. So the idea about this, I was going like, well, how does this work exactly? I was thinking, gee, a lot of these folks have families. How do they keep at it? And then I started hearing the real story. Oh, my wife's a doctor at Duke. Oh, my husband's got this great job with the state. Oh, my girlfriend got this great marketing job just out of college. So that's really, I'd say, for those of you who are out here who are listening, or if you know somebody who fits this description, the spouse with a job and benefits, they're the unsung heroes. They really do help drive a lot of the entrepreneurial economy. And when you hear these great stories about these folks who have gone out and done these wonderful world-beating things, well, remember, there might be somebody at home who doesn't get all the credit. They deserve a lot of it, too. And remember, they keep these folks caffeinated, and they keep the entrepreneurs also very much appreciated. So they should be appreciated, too. And the final symptom is a drive to change the world. This is actually one of the things that I have noticed, especially in talking with young entrepreneurs, and it's been so impressive. You know, I would say that there's a discussion going on about, like, what exactly drives entrepreneurs? Is it you want to be the cowboy, the lone ranger out there doing the things all by yourself? Well, that might have described the model 30 years ago when CED got started. It's not so much the case today. You still have people who want to go out there and change the world and do some interesting things, but they're working more collaboratively these days. And the other thing that's impressive is their motivation is really unassailable. They want to make a very big difference in a very short time. One thing I see when I talk to young entrepreneurs, especially from people my age who look at them, I mean, sometimes the things that you hear from people who are my age is, gee, these young entrepreneurs today, they're so impatient. They don't want to pay their dues. You know, they don't have any respect for authority. They don't want to wait their time and get to the next level in a time when it's more appropriate. But I think it's not because they're impatient or they're entitled. It's really because they just have a lot they want to accomplish before it's all up. Most everybody that I talk to who's in their 20s who has started a company already wants to basically have a success and move on to start another company by the time they're 26 or they're 27, and then do another one by the time they're 30. And part of the reason is because they want to go out and do something significant after that. Coming up next, you're going to hear from Nourish International, which is a nonprofit that many of the entrepreneurial companies that I work with really support. And the exciting thing about it is because they've got big, big plans. A lot of the entrepreneurs I talk to today who are young, they want to basically change hunger in Africa. They want to reduce the carbon footprint of the world. They want to go out and build coeducational schools in Afghanistan. They have very, very big ambitions, and they are not cynical. And that's another thing that I think folks my age can really learn from this group today. They're very, very inspiring, and they really have big plans. So it's not so much like they just don't have time or they're impatient. They really want to go out there and do something very big. So I think that there's really some good stuff to look forward to. I also want to point out, how many people here have seen the movie The Social Network about this founding of Facebook? So I think this is interesting. I saw it last weekend, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of people who have read the reviews of the movie, they've said, you know, the Mark Zuckerberg character does not come across as a very nice guy. You know, it looks like he stole the idea for Facebook from classmates. He sold out his roommate. Just a really rotten guy. You know, it comes across bad. However, I was hearing an interview with some Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and they had a very different take on this. They actually thought that he was a very heroic figure in the movie. And the reasons were, first of all, he actually made it happen. The other guys might have had the idea. He was the one who put in the sweat equity and made it happen. As far as they're concerned, that's the only thing that counts. The other thing was, it was very clear in the movie's portrayal, it wasn't about money. It was about creating the experience of college and the social interaction on college and putting it online and changing the world. And so those folks were saying, I can really relate to that. I don't care that he necessarily was an imperfect person, but that he did something really great, and he stuck to it and he made it happen. And so in that sense, they really think that's something to emulate. So I would just say that right now that the state of entrepreneurship is in good hands. You need some insane people out there. Not everybody can be that. Some of you in the room can help with adult supervision. But I think we should encourage this because it's really going to lead to an exciting new future, and I really have a good feeling about the people that are out there making these things happen right now. And I'd say it's time to get out that bottle of wine with a Red Bull chaser and salute entrepreneurship. So thanks very much, and keep the insanity going.